Shalom Aleichem, and welcome to Shtark Tank, the podcast about the challenges and opportunities of being a Ben Torah in the workforce. There's really only one thing that you need to know about Dr. Edo Lavi. He makes braces fun. The rest is commentary. Today, we talk about his journey to orthodontistry. We discuss the key to finding joy at work or anywhere, and his Daf Yomi podcast, Dafsplaining. Before we jump in, quick reminder that the best way to support Shtark Tank is by subscribing, leaving a 5-star review, and sharing your favorite episode with a few friends. And now, here's this week's conversation with Dr. Edo Lavi. My name is Yaakov Wolf, and this is Shtark Tank. So I tried to get a podcast studio that would allow us to set up with an orthodontist chair and allow Dr. Edo Lavi to interview me like he normally does with his fingers in my mouth, but we weren't able to get that to work. In any case, it's a great honor to have Dr. Edo Lavi, my orthodontist, here with us on Shtark Tank. Welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I joked with you before about how once I saw all the incredible Rabbanim and inspirational figures that I look up to so much, as they started piling up, and then you had a Nobel laureate recently, I knew it was only a matter of time before I'd get a phone call.
Right. So you've been an orthodontist for how many years now?
I've been an orthodontist since 2003. I graduated NYU School of Orthodontics in 2003. And you mentioned you were in my chair. That's because most of my career I was blessed to work in Ramat Beit Shemesh from 2003 to 2019. In fact, the funny story about that, I was deciding when we're talking about the decision process, but the decision came late. And so the decision to move to Israel was towards the end of the orthodontic school. So towards the end, so the way the scholastic year works, as you know, is like, let's say in the fall you go, but in orthodontics, so in the summer, that year it was done. And Nefesh B'Nefesh was in its second year. And I'm a close friend of Rabbi Fass. And towards the end of orthodontic school is when we started thinking where we're going to be settling down, because I'd been in school for so long. I'd been in school for many, many years. Orthodontic school is several years after dental school. So dental school is 4 years, and then did a residency, and another 3-year program is usually the case for specialty. So we were in school forever, and we already had 4 children, and we had just turned 30. And at the time, to that point, much like my mother had predicted, I had not yet held a job. So I was thinking where we would settle. That was a big part of our decision. Now that we're going to make our first opportunity to make money. And so we decided together that we should give Israel, that was always our dream. And so that was very, very inspiring moment for us. And we had been inspired by other people who had come before us. Michael Selesny, Oliver Shalom bears mentioning, somebody who passed away very young, but would have been a much better Shtark Tank candidate than I am. And so we moved. The funny part of the story, I suppose, is that the Nefesh B'Nefesh flight was before graduation. So I moved maybe like half a week before I officially graduated. And then the chairman of the department called me and he said, when I was in Israel, and he said, you didn't finish the program. And I said, oh, you're so funny. I pretended like it was a joke. And then he laughed along with me and sent me my diploma. So immediately after orthodontic school at NYU, we started living and working in Ramat Beit Shemesh, which was a great blessing.
But we have to be very serious here for a second because you've been doing this for 20 years. Let's be brutally honest. Who is your favorite patient of all time?
It's very funny that you ask, because you are Aviva Lerner's favorite patient. She was the office manager. My favorite patient was Nechama Zimbalist. So I have to say, a lot of parents don't pick favorites, and I have to say I feel blessed to really feel real genuine feelings for my patients and care about my patients. But I'm not afraid to rank them. But you were ranked number 2, I'm sorry to say. And the Chama Zimbalist, Zilzine was ranked number 1. But you married up, so kudos to you.
Right. For those listeners who don't yet know, Nechama Zimbalist is now Nechama Wolf. She is my wife, and the fusion of us together creates a super patient of magnitudes that Dr. Levy could never even imagine. So we are very grateful, and I would always tell the Shadchan around Beit Shemesh, including your wife who tried to set me up a number of times, that I would only go out with girls who went to Dr. Levy for their braces.
That's a very smart strategy. I don't want to disparage anybody else, but I think the way that you developed is a real testament to how much you got out of the experience. So I'm very proud of you. I'm also very proud of myself that I made it. Most people um, don't realize what a big schus it is to get to this level of Shtark Tank. I was starting to tell you that it is it's undoubtedly true that I'm the least qualified person that you've ever had on this podcast, but it is also undoubtedly true that I'm the most enthusiastic. Maybe those things correlate, but I've never been so excited. As I told you, I've been a fan of yours from when you were young, and watching you grow up and do this very serious thing. I wrote a very serious note to you because this endeavor that you're doing, that you're trying, watching you navigate life like this and try to help others do it, it's very inspiring. So I'm really just honored to, and any opportunity to talk to you is an opportunity that I welcome.
Amazing, amazing. So let's get into it. You said you started to talk about a decision, but let's go back there. You started in the place where most great things start in Shivat Keren B'Yavneh, and then you ended up going down the orthodontistry route. So maybe tell us about that. What went into that decision?
Okay. Well, a lot of times, and I prepared by listening to Shtark Tank, people think, and young people think this in general, what went into the decision? Like it's a linear thing. Pros and cons lists are important, and that's certainly true. But at the end of the day, I feel like you get carried into whatever drives you. At least in my particular case, I had no idea, and couldn't even tell you how people have an idea of how they choose their career path. So what happened specifically to me, you mentioned Karen Biavina, was I met my wife because she was a sister of a good friend of mine, David Dickstein, and so I was very young. As I mentioned, my mother had mentioned that not only did I have no aspirations of employment, I had no prospects of employment at any point. That's what she was uh, trying to explain to my in-laws because we were so young, and it was frightening to a certain extent, for sure. So I asked my Rebbe at the time, Rabbi Blachman, what to do, and I think that this is something that's really important. And this is something that you speak about all the time. Obviously, consulting with people, going around to people and seeing how they're actually living their lives in the professions that you're considering. These are the things that I would recommend. Um, my father passed away also when I was 19. This was very destabilizing, obviously, but specifically with regards to your question as far as career, right? He passed away very suddenly and he had been a neurologist. Okay. So I just assumed I went at 19 from always assuming that I would be a neurologist and work with my dad, because why not? I never really gave it thought or really cared specifically so much about what I would do. I figured I would just find joy in whatever I did. And then when he passed away, that was immediately vanished. I realized I didn't care at all about medical school. And so now the whole world was open to me. I thought I was going to be maybe a rabbi because I was in yeshiva and I was inspired. Or maybe I'd be like a therapist rabbi, like Rabbi Weinrib in Baltimore. Something like that. That's the direction I was going to. Now my mother happens to be a therapist. So I wanted to be a therapist rabbi in that moment. My mother sat me down. She said, "Therapy, it's not for you. You know, one patient at a time, every 45 minutes. It's a nice idea, but it's not for a Jewish boy like you." So that's what my mother told me. And then I spoke to Rav Blachman, and he said, "Chinuch and Rabbanis, that's not for you." In retrospect, I guess everybody who I asked, for whatever reason, thought that what they were doing, I wouldn't be good at. So Rabbi Blachman, he said a very interesting thing, and I think that might be instructive to some of your listeners. He said, "The pay stinks, and it's a difficult life," and I was not expecting that to hear from my Rebbe. It was just real talk, you know? And and then he said, "It's the kind of thing where if you want to do it, it has to be the kind of thing where I tell you all the reasons not to do it, and discourage you in every possible way, but you feel it in your bones so passionately that you say, no, I'm still going to do it. And so I think that speaks to um, how passion can drive you. And if the passion drives you, then that's the right thing for you. Well, in my particular case, I didn't have any specific direction at that time. And so I asked him, well, how am I supposed to get married? I met this girl, and he said, well, bring her here. So we went to Reb Lachman's apartment. Uh, and this was before we even got engaged, I think, but we were serious. And he kicked me out of the room and he met with her. And then he said, all right, bring him back in. And he said, okay, just do whatever she says. And so I think that can be instructive too, because marrying Shtark is a very, very important thing. And like I said, I congratulated you for doing that. Um, so if you were to ask me, this obviously doesn't apply to everybody, but in my particular case, the reason Atara um, and I, when we were talking, was leaning towards this dentistry had nothing to do with the love for teeth, although I feel very blessed to have developed a real passion for what I do. But I'm always about the people anyway, so it gave me an opportunity to. And you were kind enough to say that we've had conversations, but most of them have been one sided because my hands were in your mouth, and that doesn't bother me either. But the idea was to be able to go to Israel because at the time the reputation was, well, it's dentistry is good in Israel, and so after we graduated dental school, then I started realizing my area of interest, and then we decided orthodontics together. And then it went back to the original plan of Israel. And the fact that we were able to carry out a plan that even before we got married, we were able to do is not something that everybody um, can necessarily pull off. And you do have to be emotionally flexible, I would imagine. And we had to be very flexible in other areas, including moving to Israel and back and hopefully back again. But the short answer to your question was Atara's idea of going into dentistry has turned out to be, I think, a great idea.
And I want to pick up on two of the things that you mentioned there, and all very interesting things. One is that you said that specifically before your father died, you assumed you're going to be able to find joy in everything that you did. And then you also mentioned the fact that it's always about the people, and being with people is always great. Lo tov adam levado is always a big curse. So according to that line of thinking, and I think about this a lot also, if you have a certain temperament, you could find joy and meaning and happiness in any profession, whereas some people think, well, I need to be in X, Y, and Z profession in order to find meaning and to find happiness.
I think you're bringing up a stellar point. You know, Shark Tank is designed to help people make decisions in life, and the decisions aren't necessarily always what's going to define you. The way you deal with those decisions and the consequences, sometimes unintended consequences, might be how they define you. I actually prepared a Torah for you, Yaakov, that
Wow.
has to do exactly with that point. Yeah, I gave this a lot of thought. Um, it's Noach, so it's going to be a little outdated, but this is Sunday, so we're okay. You sent out something to me about Parshas Noach that basically amounted to putting in the work, right? Noach built the Teva. The Parshas Noach says that he was kind of caught off guard when the rain came, right? Mipnei mei hamabul. He entered the Teva because of the stormy waters. What do we mean because of the stormy waters? Hashem told him when it was going to be, right? And he built it for 120 years. So what did he think he was building it for, if not to enter the Teva? So Rashi, of course, points out that he was mamin ve'eno mamin. He was a little bit from a Ketane Emuna, in the sense that he wasn't so certain of himself. We'll put it that way. We don't have to get philosophical, but the point is that he didn't have that self-assurance of courage of his convictions. But all the while he was building. And so I think um, if you were to ask me, for example, am I fulfilling my my mission in life? It's hard to know. You just have to always do the best you can and continue to build. Um, you know, if you're just a bird that's circling around the teva over and over and over again and chasing your tail, trying to find perfection, you're not going to get anywhere. You know, the Yonah went out 3 times, had 3 missions. First, it came back with nothing. Then it came back with an olive branch, and then it came back,
Didn't come
and
back.
then it didn't come back at all the third time. Well, which of those was a successful mission, Yaakov? So I think we think in a linear way, like one of three, same mission, same hishtadlus, three entirely different outcomes. And yet, in my opinion, all three were successful because you learned something from all three. So if you're paying attention and you're learning along the way, then I think that's a successful thing. And I can't imagine Hashem would ask anything more of you. So I don't know if that answered your question, but it's about making the decision is about finding joy in what you're doing. I always think if I was driving a truck, I would listen to Shtark Tank all day long and other podcasts. I would, if I did something like a menial task where I had an opportunity to listen to podcasts, then that would be the joy that I would find in that. I don't think that's that not dealing with people is really what I'm suited for, but I would find the joy in that. And so I find the joy in people, as you mentioned. And to me, it's all about being surrounded by people. That's also been very helpful in my decisions. Remember, I told you to be very careful. I needed to be on this. If I was going to do your podcast, it had to be before our dear mutual friend, Stephen Glanz, right? Who is a Shtark Tank candidate of the highest order in business and in learning. He's a Rebbe now in Mevaseret. He sold his company to Oracle. I recommend everybody to Google that. But the reason I allow myself that joke of making fun of Steve is because I've been blessed to have such dear friends and friends that those people that surround you, a true friend not only is somebody who can tell you did a good job. I don't have anybody in my life that's going to tell me I did a good job on Shtark Tank. They're going to tell me I was too funny in the times of war, or they'll tell me I was too serious, that if you're having me on, then you're not having me on to have a serious conversation. Nah, you're only having me on for jokes. They'll tell me every criticism under the sun, and that's a beautiful thing because these are friends that are comfortable, right, correcting you. They know you. They care enough to know you and to give you corrective advice. So I don't know if it comes up on Shtark Tank too often, but social person such as myself, for me, it's all about the people that you're surrounded with, and that peer group is also very, very important.
Right. I think you also spoke about the your decision to go into dentistry, and it had all these different factors. And so it sort of reminds me, because like especially in like yeshiva coffee room hack about dentistry, so there are like two things you'll hear. One is that like is the profession to go into to have lots of time to learn, and the counter argument to that is like, well, you're spending all day with your hands in people's mouths and breathing their breath and just seeing what they had for their last meal. So you seem to like transcend all of that in the way you approach this.
Well, transcend is strong, but you're very kind. I struggle with everything always and try to do the best I can. There is an aspect of dentistry that being your own boss, I guess is one way of saying it. I've never answered to anyone for how I'm spending my time, other than myself and my creator. That's tough thing, even when maybe it's easier when somebody's telling you what to do, but the ability to balance work and life and family and learning, it's up to you. You create your own right schedule based on your values, and so dentistry certainly has enabled me to do that. When I was making this decision, I was actually all over the place, and I was pretty stressed out, Yaakov, because I was already married, and so now it's real, or at least that's how I felt. And so I went to a lot of people to ask Gedolim. So I had 1 year left in Smicha at YU. I'd already done my shimush. I was the rabbi of Stern College. It's a long story, but anyways, the Shabbos rabbi at Stern College. This was like I was married. Like I was newly married. Girls were coming up to me at Shabbos and asking me halachic shailas. I was like, let me get back to you in a couple of months. Anyways, and so I had Yeridea left. I had to learn Yeridea. That was the only thing I had left. And I went to Rav Herschel Schechter Shlita, and I asked him, I think I'm probably going to do dental school. Should I finish Smicha? And I went to somebody by the name of Rav Yitzchak Frankel Shlita, who was my Rebbe in high school. Rav Yitzchak Frankel said, I was telling him all my options. He said, dentistry is awesome. I was like, it's usser? He said, no, dentistry is awesome. All my dentists have time to learn. That was a very big deal for me to hear. Then I went to Rav Schechter, Of course, I asked him, should I finish smicha? And he said, smicha is not for you. Just like anybody who I'd ever asked who was in that position. He said, can you believe he said this? This is Rav Hershel Schachter. I promise you he said this. And I'm still grateful to him for this to this day. He said, you're going to dental school anyway. As a dentist, I'll give you a bracha. He said, you'll always have time to learn. Um, you'll have time to do kiruv, and you're going to find your day very boring and technical because he knows me. I know a lot of people find your day very exciting. Maybe I would have now, But at the time, he said, you're newly married, you're stressed out about your future. Like, the last thing you need is to break your head knowing me over your day. I thought there again, very unexpected advice from a Rebbe, right? And
It's
yet,
not too late, by the way.
exactly. Well, that's what he said then. Um, and so he said, you could always do it later. It's not too late. Later. In the meantime, you'll have a parnasa. You'll get your life started. You'll go to Eretz Yisrael if you're zoche. And you'll make your own schedule, and you can do a lot more learning as a dentist than some certainly shul rabbanim have time to do. You can create your own life, and you're not defined by your profession. Although, again, these are landmark decisions that it's kind of almost a pachad, right? It can take you any which way, and one decision can have a massive effect. But you can't overstress it, that because if you do, then you're more prone to make a bad decision. You have to try to make the best decision at the time and find the way to be the best version of yourself along that path. So I'm grateful for my Rebbeim and my friends who guided me to this point.
And you made reference to this journey that it was really about aliyah, and it worked, and then it wasn't working so well. So can you tell that story in brief for those who aren't familiar?
Oh my gosh. Okay. Thanks a lot, Yaakov. I sounded like such. I did not sound. Okay. I was on a podcast called 1840. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. And they asked me that question. That was the premise of the podcast. Me being on the podcast was embarrassing in its own right because Steve Glanz, the aforementioned Steve Glanz, and all these other yeshivas, we used to run these panels to show everybody you could be a Talmud Chacham and a professional and live in Israel. It's a possibility. It's an option. And so you can imagine people were going through yeshivas and they knew me as the aliyah option guy. And then I had to go on a podcast about why I had to uh, leave Eretz Israel. I also got a lot of rabbis in trouble, by the way. I don't think that's sort of like the postscript. What basically happened was our oldest kids moved to America. That's what basically happened. And it was very much a consequence of our chinuch decisions at the time. And I think it actually does fit in with some of the things that we're talking about because, like me, my children are very social people. And so they were really connected to their peer group. And even though they could have been Dati Lumi or they could have been Haredi, and that was kind of in Ramat Beit Shemesh, they were in the middle, they would have done best staying with a critical mass of people who are exactly like them, where they could just do what their friends are doing. That's basically the people that we know that have navigated and stayed on that fine, thin, razor thin line. That's a challenging thing to do, and you become sort of a singular person. It's a lot easier um, if you're with a group. That's true for most people. Um, so most of their friends in Ramat Beit Shemesh actually were very comfortable finding their place, and so that's what we had hoped would happen. But as it turns out, that didn't happen to them, and their peer group were Americans, so they ended up in America because now they're Baruch Hashem, they're in a situation where they're following their friends. But that was a devastating thing for us to feel like family kind of. It's a lot of challenging feelings. You feel like your family's slipping away from you. You feel like your dream of Israel is fading in front of you. It was very, very hard. Very hard. We ended up speaking to Rabbanim. I mentioned the Rabbanim that we spoke to, and then some of those Rabbanim actually got in trouble because some of my dear friends who gave me a hard time all the time started giving those Rabbanim a hard time for giving us the advice to move on. That said, in retrospect, this has been a very healthy time for us. Um, so again, moved basically for family, and now my mother-in-law lives next door to me. It's kind of like a sitcom. You know what a sitcom is, Jakob? And that's a big schus and she also
Should
and
I
our
cut you
only
off before
grandchildren.
we keep going on this route, which I don't think you.
Yeah, no, my grandchildren also live in my community, and so it's a very important time career wise. I'm sitting in this weird hotel in at a conference where I'm speaking, and it was a siyata d'shmaya. I found an office where I was able to really grow professionally in the very specific mechanics of what I do, and it was really career altering for me. And as recently as over this past weekend, I met some very prominent Israeli orthodontists that I've been trying to be in touch with, and now I'm sort of a bar hachi in their eyes, like they consider me a macher. And so that opens doors for us to come back and bring back a lot of the things that we've gained in terms of family, in terms of professional advancement. These are things we can bring back to Israel. We felt very grateful. My training in orthodontics, there are some good friends of mine who are currently, some of my best friends were zocha to do that also, would bring their American training of orthodontics to Israel. Now I'm on a higher level. I could bring that back to Israel. When we left, my prayer was the prayer that we say in Shir Malos, that noseh alu mosav. We say those words that we should be carrying bundles. And it is my fervent hope and prayer to be like gathering these bundles in Chutz La'aretz and to carry them joyfully back and to share on our way back. So, but it also speaks to our initial discussion, which is weighing your options and finding joy in what you do. I'm not fatalist. My dear friend Rabbi Barak Safar always says that one of the things that he admires about me is that I don't get into down mode. I've been very blessed to have a positive attitude, and for what some of the things we've been through, that's been super critical. He says it also lignai and lishvach, because he's saying it's incredible how far down you can go and not get discouraged. It's kind but by the same token, it's been very helpful to be emotionally flexible, to be able to handle life's challenges. I am acutely aware of some of the life challenges that everyone faces, and some of the life challenges in particular going on in Israel. And they can really bring you down. And it is not for me to tell people to keep their chin up, because I am not in their position currently. And that's a challenge that I don't know anybody that can actually live up to. But certainly nobody would disagree that moving on and choosing to live and choosing to build is better than the alternative. And so that requires strength. It requires flexibility, and it requires, I think, people who love you, who care enough to support you around you. And so that's been very big in my life, and so that's where we are right now. And I'm here for you, Yaakov.
That's very beautiful, and you are, and I appreciate that. There's a lot there, and we're not going to do a whole aliyah podcast right now, but I think one angle that I wanted to dive a little deeper into is the fact that, many of our listeners are, raising kids, and if they're not Be'ez Hashem at the right time, they will be raising children of their own, and we all have these hopes and dreams and aspirations for our children, and yet we have such a complex relationship with the, we have this complex dynamic where we have schools and shuls and communities and all these other outside influences on our children. And so on the one hand, we want everything that they should be just like we imagine them. On the other hand, there are all these other influences from the outside. So just, can you zoom in on that a little bit and how you think about that? Because you said like it's your kids ended up making the decision, taking a path that you weren't necessarily hoping they would, but they did. And you're now doing your best under those circumstances.
Yeah, I think that's very case specific. You know, if I don't want to embarrass you, but that your parents are renowned in our peer circles as the number one parents that anyone could ever have. Their reputation is that they're extremely caring and extremely intentional with their parenting, and that they are really incredible at, and it's obvious in the Peros, really incredible at instilling values in their kids. I think it's very important as a parent not to be lazy and not to be selfish, but at the same time to recognize that kids have to, that it's their own lives. And so your parents strike that balance in such a beautiful way. So you, even me asking me a parenting question would be like the Brisker Rav asking me for a Svara and Daf Yomi. But I will tell you that to the extent that your listeners, everyone's different, um, I think that we have to be true to yourself. Okay. So we know a lot of families where everyone's kind of the same ish, not the same, but you could tell that the chinuch was strong and that the family has like a stamp that everyone has like very, very deeply instilled, consistent values that really inform so much of their behavior and their choices. In our particular family, we're very honest. So that's kind of the mantra. It can be lignai. It could be tough because if somebody in school is being mistreated by somebody in a position of authority, so now you have a choice as a parent. Are you going to focus on the deference to authority, which is a basic fundamental of Judaism and chinuch, or are you going to focus on being empathetic to that child and what they're going through? Um, and that is the fundamental decision that plays into every one of these things. I think that's the decision that plays into every one of the things that you're talking about. Israel versus America, American values versus Israeli values, etc. So for example, Ramat Beit Shemesh was our kids were going to Haredi schools. Certain values weren't exactly in concert with the values in the home. That's to be expected. It can't be exact. So we have basic fundamental values. We try to impart midos, authenticity, right? Joy. I would say that that's like the three pillars. And so from that, every one of our children does their own thing within that context. But we err on the side of authenticity. And if we think something is wrong, we're going to talk about it at the Shabbos table. We sometimes have yeshiva guys. We used to have it a lot more. My wife really misses that. That's why we come every sukkah and we host yeshiva guys. And they watch the dynamic at the table, and it may not be what they were used to growing up. But we err on the side of just honesty and authenticity. We talk about everything always, and that's my style. And authenticity just runs through our family, and so in that sense, we're playing to our strengths. If I tried to be dogmatic and like yell at my kid if he came 3 minutes late for chakras and explain to him like we're lavis, we don't do that, it wouldn't work because if you try to be something that you're not, you usually end up being a bad version of the thing you're trying to be. Um, Aishas, that well, the part is it's more what you do than what you preach. So therefore, know yourself as a parent, be honest with yourself, and show by example to the best that you can, and then just be as honest as authentic as possible. So that's our style. When they make their own decisions, that's not a reflection on you or your parenting per se. That's you allowing them to be them, and ultimately that is what you want because they're their own people. We experienced that multiple times before we caught on. All these. We were growing up with these like YU yeshivish with like in Passaic or whatever with all these like little kids with payas behind their ears and all that. It's cute, but at the end of the day, when they grow up to be their own people, they have to be given the tools to be authentic to themselves. And I think they can't give a child a greater gift than that.
That's very nice. Let's transition because we're getting a little bit low on time here to your Daf Yomi Shir, your Daf Yomi podcast. I don't know how you like to define it, and the Chabura. You can tell me how you define it, and just maybe start from the beginning and how this all got started.
Well, thank you for the big plug. I don't understand two things. When I was in 1840, for some reason, Beshevkin was not concerned about my daily schedule, which I was very offended by because he asks most real people what their schedule is. He's interested. And he didn't plug my Daf Yomi podcast. So let's go. It's Daf Splaining, You can get it, I think, on iTunes or Spotify and everything. And it's very me. I'll tell you what I mean. Well, first you asked how it started. It's very me because I was never really consistent. I was usually like a model of inconsistency with flashes of brilliance, if I may say. But Rav Milinowitz Zatzal, who was the Rav of our shul, Ramat Beit Shemesh, always encouraged me to give shiurim as much as I could on a consistent basis. I tried to make the shiur when he wasn't around because that's the last thing I needed was Rav Milinowitz, who's the chief editor for Art Scroll, at a daf shiur or even at a daf whatever review shiur, which was what I was giving. And also, like, whatever, I thought it was beneath him and I didn't want him there. But he came every time anyways. And he would not be denied because he wanted to support that idea. So shortly after we moved in fall of 2019, he passed away. I had an opportunity to talk to him for a long time just before he passed away, which was just like a blessing. And so I was super inspired I said, I'm going to do this for him. He was there for me. I'm going to do this for him. So I decided I'm going to teach Daf Yomi, Le'ila Nishmaso. I'm going to do a full cycle. I'm going to learn Shas, Le'ila Nishmaso. Now, it came at a decent time because we had just moved and I was unemployed. It was as if I just come out of school. So I didn't have a job, so I had plenty of time to prepare. And then COVID hit, so then I had plenty of time to prepare. The thing is, not you can't just show up and tell people that you want to teach daf. Not everybody wants to hear daf from you. And I even went to a few people and told them I want to give daf, and they said that's very nice. I hope that goes well for you, Rabbanim. But I met somebody, and they asked me how I was doing. I kind of peripherally knew them, and he asked me how you doing, and I said I think by the time the next cycle starts, because I was like trying to get Daf Yomi cheer going mode. So for whatever reason, in a regular social conversation, it was this dentist Yoni Barron, who was in the JCC pool in Baltimore. He's asking me how I'm doing, and I'm telling him I think by the time that the next cycle starts, I'll be like a little bit more acclimated, which was in January, you might recall, of 2020. Anyways, he's like, what, you learned DAF? And as fate would have it, they have a 620 minion that was flailing and is now really burgeoning. It's doing really well. And at the time, they couldn't get 10 men for that minion. And B'nai Jacob Shar Zion, which is a shul of Rabbi Rose Shlita, is the rabbi, and previously was Rabbi Hauer at the time, who's now with the OU. Anyways, so he said, we're desperate. We're desperate because we need people at this minion. So we need a Daf Yomi shear before that minion. So I said, wait, but what time did you say the minion was? Anyway, 5:30 a.m. It was the craziest thing. Mind you, I don't start work till 11. So it's not like I'm rushing. But I was desperate, so it was my only option. So I took the opportunity. And I'm shocked, Yaakov. I thought I was going to spend full all-nighters crying, preparing the daf. But Art Scroll was very helpful. And I'm doing it to Ilan Nishmas or Melinowitz anyway, so I could justify being very, very Meshuba to Art Scroll with my pshat, if you want to call it that. And I do it 5 days a week. So if you're a type A personality, there's a bunch of different types of people who do daf yomi. Most of them are type A, checking it off. They like the consistency and all of that. So you would hate my podcast if you did that because I'm only Monday through Friday. So already you're not getting the full amount, right? Hopefully, if I do a few cycles, I'll fill it all in. Also, if I'm away like I am now, I originally used to have fill-ins, but I burnt them all out because nobody wants to go to 5:30. It used to be 5:35. It's a 45-minute year, but since October 7th, we said we got to do something, so we moved it to 5:30.
Wow.
Which obviously we regret every single day, but hopefully, if at least it's a little schus, maybe it's worth it. My daf style. Thank you for asking about my daf style. It's actually I err on the side of making it relatable. To me, I find the material extremely fascinating. I find it like a storyline, like a narrative. I can't get past it. I don't see it as like a shock levitaria. I see it as a story, and every question, even if it's something that's not halacha lemaisa, it's like historically fascinating to me, and the personalities are fascinating to me. And as we've come from from brachos all the way now, and making it through all the way to deep into Baba Basra, the personalities come out. So, for example, I am rightfully accused of being a Rava apologist. I I think those his svars are so clear, I can't get over it. And you and I were always aware of Yal Kagam, but when I saw Yal Kagam like come to life, I was like, "That's right, Yal Kagam. Rava is of course always right. Abaye is great, but like, okay, so 6 times he's right." So the personalities, I don't psychoanalyze or anything like that, but I get really into it when it comes to that. Did you know that when I was working in, I had a satellite, when I worked in Israel, I had a satellite office in the Gush, and this woman by the name of Shira Schmidtman, she was in the middle of a PhD on Rami Bar Chama in Bar Ilan. Um, so I was always speaking to my patients, as you know, and like gaining everything from everyone. And I thought that that was incredible. She actually, I think, was mechavein to the Shagas Aryeh, some crazy thing. Like her premise has something to do with Rami Bar Chama um, being consistent with the Yerushalmi. It's beyond the scope of this podcast or even my daf planning, but I will tell you that when you know that somebody's done a PhD on Rami Bar Chama, you can't read Rami Bar Chama in the Gemara without like paying closer attention. So I noticed he was really sharp. Like for Daf Yomi, it's kind of rough because every time we're about to finish the daf, Rami Bar Chama, we're like, uh oh. Because it's always super choppy question. It's always like really clever. And like at 5:30, you're not always in the mood for it when you're trying to finish daf, but we embrace it. And by the way, he and Rava were the two best guys in the shir. Read the Gemaras, you'll see. It's not me speculating. And Rav Chisda's shir. So, anyways, just like just like my work is about the people, the daf is about the people in the daf. It's about the people on the daf.
The
It's
joy in the
about the
people.
experience. It's the joy in it, and so it's a very joyful daf. It's not a check off the list daf, um, and it's
And you
brought
don't need
people
to go
together.
to like external sources to find like joy and shtick. Like it's all within the actual material.
Well, it's very kind of you to say, and I don't know what you're referring to, but I feel what you're saying very, very strongly. Um, I think that however people consume daf is incredible, and and anybody who gives of themselves to teach it is incredibly commendable. Especially there's movements now of like just large movements of people getting excited about daf, and I think that that's incredible. But maybe because internally there is that inner nerd in me, I don't find the external shtick funny. I happen to be like a little bit of a comedy snob, so the comedy doesn't speak to me, but like the subtle comedy inside the actual daf, that speaks to me. So it's a matter of taste, and yeah, I find real joy in the daf. I feel Rabbi Kiva's laughter through Churban and things like that. It's a matter of perspective, right? It's not like uh, Leitzanus is making fun of serious things. That's Leitzanus. That's as bad a thing as you could do. But Simcha is making fun of non-serious things and finding joy in meaningful things, and that's what we strive to do. And so it's a very Simcha-oriented daf. We find joy in those things,
That's
and
amazing.
and it has
And
brought a
because
lot of
you,
people together.
I know you wanted me to. I mean, I was going to actually ask you about the process of how you do it, your schedule, but because you really want to have this, in Hebrew they call it chava mitakenet, so we can start from the night, halayla va'erev va'boker. So let's start with your nightly schedule, then your daily schedule, and I really do want to hear how you go about producing this year on a 5 times a week basis.
Wow, you know what? You are too kind. I'm having the best time. This might be the best moment of my whole life, and I'm thinking, um, yeah. So I'll tell you. I I get up. I'm gonna do not what you asked because my nighttime really
I just
falls
wanted to do
apart.
what you asked me to
I
ask you.
understand. No, I know you were trying to be nice, and I do appreciate it, and that means more to me than anything. But I got to get to Sheer at 5:30, so I get up at either 5:01 or 5:08, depending on how tired I know I am. And then I get there. That's the astonishing thing, Yaakov. I get there on time. It's really messed up. If you know me, it's an unprecedented thing that happens every day during the middle of the week. After that, so we give daf and then we daven. And then after that, I have a chavrusa to prepare the next day's daf. And so if you're doing the math, I get home, it's like 8:15. People are like on their way out to school. I've already taught daf, daven, and learned the next day's daf. That's in the ideal. And now I have time before I go to work. So that's when I do my either exercise, or if I have to do more for daf, or if I have something to take care of, then I work from about 10 to 6, roughly. And then the evenings are something that we're working on. That's family time. A lot of times, historically, it's been second chavrusa for daf. Um, Sometimes now, Rabbi Marwick Shlita, who I should mention, in everybody should come to Shomrei in Baltimore if you're in the Baltimore area, and he's trying to strengthen a night seder there. So I'm always tweaking and tightening my schedule, and I want to be more productive in those evening hours. Also, while at the same time being home for the family. My family will tell you that by the time I get back from work, I'm a little bit of a schmata. So I'm like passing out and taking and when I'm telling you my schedule, my family will tell you I'm skipping a couple of naps in there because it is crazy to get up that early and to be that productive. And then I normally go to sleep late at night also. So it doesn't work unless you're either disciplined, which I'm not, or you're taking naps, which I'm great at. So I'm kind of playing to my strengths. So to me, if I could take like a power nap right when I get home from work, and then be fresh for everyone in the evening, then that actually works for me. But thank you for asking about my schedule.
So you're
I think that
basically
people
doing
can
like
really
the
learn from it.
Rambam's sleep schedule.
Well, that's kind of you. Yes, I actually think that um, my schedule is above average. So I'm glad that you asked, and I do forgive Bashevkin for not asking, but I'm glad that it's out there now.
Okay. This has been very fun, and I get a lot of joy out of speaking to you, just like all your patients do. And I guess just to finish off, I really want to point out that you managed to take the experience of getting braces and having your orthodontistry from something which is so feared and so reviled to something so enjoyable. And is that something that you like set out to do as like your life's mission, or you just sort of ended up there?
I think it's a combination. It's the funny thing that you mentioned. We have this Invisalign convention where I currently am, and from the beginning to end, all they're talking about is the patient experience is what matters, and they're kind of preaching to other dentists to try to do what we were always doing all along. For us, it's about the people. I am a connector and a communicator. So when somebody comes, that's a very real thing for me. You know how connected I am to your family and to your wife's family.
Oh,
So the Zimbalists, I'm not going to get better than the Zimbalists. So speaking of Nechama and her family, so um, I had the privilege of treating, I think, all the siblings, um, including Avram and including Elimo, Zecher Tzaddik Levracha. And in the case of Elimo, he was a very challenging case clinically. Like Nechama and like you, just an angel of a kid. Like, just, I didn't know that he was a builder. I didn't know that part of his life, but I knew that he was just an unbelievable sweet kid, and outstandingly so. And so when he had complications and I moved, he was in the middle of his case. And the Zimbalists had a tough time, your Mechutanim. Um, not your Mechutanim, but you know what I mean. Your parents' Mechutanim. They had a tough time finding somebody to take on his case because he was in the middle of like a case that nobody wanted to take on, more or less. And because of the way I approach what I do, and I'm about the people, I felt, you know, their challenge. It was something that they needed to take care of, and it was a sincere thing. And so I said, you know what? I'm just going to step up and treat him remotely with Invisalign from here. And we're going to just stay in touch because that will mean something to me, anyways, to be able to stay in touch with these people that I love so much. And the more connected I am to people in Israel, the more chizuk I get from that. Anyway, um, anybody who listens to this podcast and even people who don't know that Elimo was tragically killed, and he was in the middle of treatment. He and your mother-in-law, Sarah, and I had a three-way uh, chat called Smiles Are Us. And oh my goodness, when I heard the news, I was like everyone. My wife's very, very connected to what's going on in Israel, and I am too. But I don't stay up all night. I like check in the morning. That's like part of the routine. How's it going? But I just knowing how precious he was, and they all are. But obviously, for better or for worse, it's different when um, and how connected we were. I was besides myself, and I didn't even know how I would call his mother to console her. That's how devastating it was. I didn't know like where to start with it. Anyway, she called me amazingly. I
When did she
think it
call you?
was it was like 4 in the morning. I think the day after the Levaya. I think it was maybe the first day of Shiva to let me know because she wasn't sure if I had heard. I was gonna call her when she called me. I felt obviously the grief, but the connection was so strong. Like it made it like what in that moment of her and the whole family and Simi and all the siblings in the moment of their immense pain. um I saw the seeds of like how people who are there for each other, connected to each other, if we hold on to each other so tight, we can build. And that's what Elimo would want, and that would meant so much to me. My wife and I were on the phone with her. We cried. For a guy who didn't know what to say, we ended up talking for like 45 minutes, on the morning of the first day of Shiva, if I recall correctly. And it was just about all the memories, and it was just so moving. And then I had to go give daf. So I was like a mess. So I start off saying we're going to learn this Masechet, Leila Nishmas Elimo. It was
It was
Baba
towards the
Metzia.
end of Basra when he was killed.
Baba Metzia, right. It was toward the ends of Baba
Right,
Metzia.
right.
And so we're gonna do the Siyam, Leila Nishmaso. And then there's this guy. Some people have 100,000 listeners. I have like five for my podcast, but most of them are like my friends. Like shout out to Matt Bornstein who listens, and our good friends from Ramat Beit Shemesh. But this guy never knew me. He doesn't know me from anywhere other than the podcast. His name is Moshe Aziz, and Moshe Aziz heard how broken up I was that morning, and so he contacted me, and I'd never met him. He said, "I'm coming down to Baltimore." He lives in New York. So I'm coming down to Baltimore. I'm going to sponsor a massive siyum, and we're going to do it Leon with Eli Mo. So think about the connections. We talk about being about the people. This is a guy who doesn't even know me, let alone Eli Mo, and he feels so connected to Eli Mo that he wants to give chizuk and to connect. It's unfortunately the way tragedy, unfortunately, can do that. But when it does bring people together, that's, I think, a really appropriate response. Incredible chizuk. I think that's what it's all about. He did see him. It was amazing. We spoke about Elimo, and a lot of people actually joined the Daf Yomi. I mean, some very prominent. I have like a better Baba Basra crew, a bigger crew, I should say, because they were so inspired by it. So it's inspiration leading to Torah, leading to real connection, all of it just continuously feeding itself. That's that's what we try to do. I uh, yeah, I know that you all miss him so terribly, and I know that his presence is felt in the shul. Rabbi Rosner, who maybe I should give a plug. There's a guy named Rabbi Shalom Rosner who also gives a daf yomi. He's okay. I'm a little bit of a daf yomi kind of sore, by the way. And I think Rabbi Rosner is quite excellent. I'll give him a plug. And he's your uncle, so his shul is filled with all of Elimo's things, and he was just so incredibly talented. But for me, it was what an incredibly gentle, generous soul he was, and so we'll try to incorporate that in everything we do. And I just hope that we can continue to keep all these connections. I mean, you just contacting me gives me chizuk. If I ever have an opportunity to give you chizuk, and that's what I was doing, I was trying to give him chizuk. That's where it started. So to me, it's an example of the place where you put your hishtadlus and go a little bit out of your comfort zone, that's where you create the most meaningful, make the most meaningful progress, create the most meaningful connections. So yeah, so shout out to your beautiful family, and hopefully we'll have the strength to make right decisions. You have Nechama, so I'll tell you what Rav Nachman told me. Do whatever Nechama says. That'll work. You don't have to. You don't have to have any of this anxiety about life decisions, Yaakov. You're good.
Thank you. This has been very special, and I think just the joy, the positive attitude, and finding the people and being there for the people along. I think that's, for me, one of the main takeaways of this fantastic conversation. So, Dr. Lavi, thank you for joining us, and we have to do this again because there's so much more that we didn't even cover yet.
That's right. If you don't call me, it's gonna be awkward. Okay, I love to you and your family, to everyone in Israel. We're on our way back. Never felt more confident of that. We're working on it. Okay, so
All right,
Bezat
we're looking
Hashem, we should
forward.
be able to go through all of life's chapters. You talk about all the stations. You're earlier on in your stage than I am, but I give you a bracha that every stage you should be able to fulfill your potential beyond your wildest dreams, and do as you have been doing. Help others do that as well. It's an incredible thing that you're doing, and you should continue to have the strength to do it and be very much tzliach.
Amen. Thank you.
That's our show for today. If you enjoy Shtark Tank, you will also enjoy the Shtark Tank Quiet WhatsApp group, where we send episode updates, exclusive bonus content, and more. The link is in the show notes.